Let's get down to business. Dry skin can happen anywhere on the body. I have a ton of videos on strategic approaches to addressing dry skin, but one area that frequently gets dry is your cheeks. Today's video, we're going to be talking all about dry skin on the cheeks of your face, why you might have this, trust me, there are some reasons you probably haven't even thought of, and how to go about addressing it. One thing you have to understand about your cheeks, they are pretty exposed territory to the elements given, well, their prominence. That, coupled with the fact that they have a high density of blood vessels compared to other areas on your face. As blood flows through the skin of your cheeks, that facilitates more transepidermal water loss out of the skin, leading to, well, dryness, and also facilitating enhanced penetration of things that might just be irritating. Now, just like any dry skin issue that you might be dealing with, environmental exposures can lead to dry skin, including on the cheeks, especially this time of year when we're outdoors. Cold winter winds can wick away moisture very quickly, leaving the skin of our cheeks, our nose, our lips raw, red, chapped, wind burn. Not fun. But not just wind, also sun. Ultraviolet radiation can precipitate flushing in those predisposed, also weakens barrier integrity, causing damage to the skin barrier, facilitating more water loss, and also the damage to the skin cells results in a need for more blood flow, which, spoiler alert, facilitates even more transepidermal water loss. The other sneaky snake in dry skin, especially on the face, is that radiant heat that we all love to cozy up to, whether it be a fireplace, a space heater, or the heater in your car. So make sure you direct the dry air away from your face. And when you're outdoors, rein in physical barriers against wind, like a big scarf. Make sure that you are protecting your skin from ultraviolet radiation year-round, especially this time of year when we have a lot of snow, which reflects ultraviolet radiation up onto our skin, weakening barrier function. So put on your sunscreen to exposed areas. This time of year, we may slack on sunscreen because we're all covered up, but cheeks, they still are likely seeing sun, wind, all sorts of elemental exposures. Sunscreen not only will protect against ultraviolet radiation to these areas, but it's also in a moisturizing base that will help with barrier integrity, limiting windburn. There are all sorts of baseline underlying skin conditions that can lead to dry cheeks, especially atopic dermatitis. Commonly, people refer to this as eczema, but it's just one type of eczema. It comes and goes, often flares up in the winter months when the air becomes drier, and it is a condition where you have at baseline an impaired skin barrier, usually due to maybe mutations in something called filaggrin. And the cheeks are common territory to get flare-ups of atopic dermatitis, especially in young children. Running a humidifier in the bedroom at night can really help to reduce flares of atopic dermatitis, along with regularly moisturizing. Moisturize, moisturize, moisturize. Consistent use of a moisturizer can help heal flare-ups faster and reduce the need to continue using topical steroids, a mainstay in atopic dermatitis management. Speaking of management, make sure you're checking in with your dermatologist so that they can help you in terms of identifying potential triggers for flare-ups and prescribing medications if necessary, such as a topical steroid or a topical calcineurin inhibitor like pimcrolimus or tacrolimus. Maybe your cheeks are dry but also rough and bumpy. Maybe you have keratosis pilaris, a dry skin condition that, as a side note, many people with atopic dermatitis have, although not always. But essentially what this is a problem with the natural exfoliation and turnover of the dry skin lining the pores, the hair follicles, so you get these little rough, dry bumps. Often can affect the cheeks. That is a really common location for rough and bumpy dry skin to pop up. If this is something that you're dealing with, the humidifier can certainly help. But I also suggest reining in facial moisturizers that contain keratolytic ingredients, such as salicylic acid, glycolic acid, mandelic acid, lactic acid, or urea. One of my favorite recent finds in terms of a keratolytic moisturizer that can be used on the face for facial keratosis pilaris, but also on the body, because a lot of people deal with this on the upper arms and the thighs, is the Cetaphil Gentle Exfoliating Essay Lotion. Fragrance-free, it has salicylic acid, mandelic acid, and alpha hydroxy acid, and gluconolactone, a polyhydroxy acid that will help with replenishing moisture so that those cells lining the pore will hopefully turn over a little bit more efficiently. The acids in this formulation help dissolve the glue between that dry, rough stuff, allowing it to exfoliate and smoothing out the skin. And ultimately, what this is going to help with is not just getting rid of the dry, rough bumps, but also it helps to improve barrier function long term. Flushing, blushing, flushing, burning, stinging, comes and goes, often with dilated blood vessels. If that sounds like you might just have rosacea, a chronic inflammatory skin condition. In addition, you might get little bumps that kind of look like pimples, often very, very sensitive to things that you put on your skin. Finding skincare products that don't aggravate rosacea can be a challenge, but when it comes to rosacea flare-ups, a common trigger is going to be ultraviolet radiation exposure. That is a really common trigger. Also, alcohol consumption, alcoholic beverages, heat, steam, spicy foods, spices that you might use to cook with. I have a ton of videos on this channel detailing rosacea skincare, how to go about identifying and avoiding common rosacea triggers that you might not even be aware are problematic for you. There are a lot, including foods that can commonly aggravate rosacea. If you deal with rosacea, you know already probably that the cheeks are a common territory for it to pop up. In addition to gentle skincare, avoiding triggers, follow up with a dermatologist. Prescription medications might just be needed to control flare-ups. It's important to control flare-ups early on because if they go untreated, uncontrolled, then the rosacea can become more fixed, more stubborn, and you can be left with persistent facial redness. Contact dermatitis, another possible reason for red, dry skin on the cheeks. Contact dermatitis might be you're coming in contact with something that you're allergic to, maybe a skincare product, your makeup, your foundation. And as a side note, this can happen at any point. A mistake a lot of people make is to look at what they're using and say, oh, I've used this for years and years and years, never has caused me a problem, this can't be it. But what happens is you can develop an allergy to something you have used with no problem for years and years. So it might just be the culprit. Also, you can develop an irritant contact dermatitis, maybe to a skincare product that you are using that is just too irritating. Maybe you have been using a harsh scrub, an exfoliant, and you have just gone a little bit too far in your exfoliating technique, and you have left behind a raw, red, impaired barrier that is more vulnerable to water loss. Speaking of sort of a contact dermatitis, although almost an entity in and of itself, is retinoid dermatitis. A lot of people like to refer to this as the retinoid uglies, and I have lots of videos all about this. Basically, if you are new to a topical retinoid, whether it be tretinoin, tazarotene, trifarotene, or adapalene, in the beginning, these topical medications can cause the skin to be very sensitive, to become dry, irritated, red, and for you to be more sensitive to things that you put on your skin as well as environmental exposures like wind and the sun that just burn and sting. Fortunately, after several weeks, most people, the retinoid dermatitis will calm down, will go away, but it can be really uncomfortable. So one of the things I suggest doing if you are starting a retinoid for the first time to reduce the risk of this sort of retinoid dermatitis or mitigate its severity is to approach your skincare routine doing something known as the moisture sandwich, where you put a moisturizer on, then you put your retinoid on, and then you put another layer of moisturizer on top. This can really help to address the barrier issues that you might encounter when first starting a topical retinoid. Check out my video, as a side note, all about how to introduce a retinoid without getting super irritated, because I give a lot more specific strategic tips and approaches to your skincare routine that can really make or break your success with a topical retinoid. And then we have underlying medical conditions. This is something a lot of people may not realize, but I've said it before, your skin is a window to what is going on internally, and there are certain health conditions that have skin findings even early on. A lot of patients who have diabetes can often have dry skin in general, but especially on the cheeks. They kind of develop a flushed appearance known as rubeosis. Many patients who have the autoimmune condition systemic lupus erythematosus develop what is commonly referred to as a butterfly rash or a malar rash. Malar means cheek, so you get this red rash on the cheeks, often precipitated by sun exposure, because patients with lupus are very, very, very sensitive to ultraviolet radiation from the sun. They are very sun sensitive and they have to be super duper careful with sun exposure. Check out my video all about the skin signs of lupus, because let me tell you, that is a whole video with a ton of information packed in there. So check that one out. And those of you who are approaching or going through menopause, you know the dreaded hot flashes, flushing, blushing often leads to red cheeks, coupled with the fact that a decline in estrogen as occurs around menopause leads to a greater tendency overall for dry skin. Now, as far as skincare for redness on the cheeks, we already touched on sun sun protection. Regardless of what the underlying cause is, sun protection definitely is going to be very helpful. Also, you want to make sure that you are laying off of the exfoliants on the face unless you have keratosis pilaris, in which case using a gentle moisturizer with keratolytics can help soften and gently exfoliate that buildup of dry, rough skin texture, the rough and bumpy stuff. But for these other things, keratolytics can end up stinging, burning, and being far too irritating. Consider running a humidifier at night when you sleep, especially at night. Our skin is even more vulnerable to transepidermal water loss because we have greater blood flow to the surface of the skin, especially the cheeks. And running a humidifier can help mitigate the impetus for water to leave our skin at night. Make sure you are not washing your face in super hot water. When you're dealing with a flare-up of dry, red cheeks, consider backing down on the frequency with which you wash your face to just once a day, ideally at night before you go to bed, to remove dirt and pollutants. Use a mild, gentle cleanser and then apply a moisturizer. Now, when it comes to a flare-up of dryness on the cheeks, you might also want to select some sort of balm or a barrier cream. And of course, you guys already know that I am a huge fan of just plain petroleum jelly. Great skin protectant. And a lot of people like to put it on the face as the final step in their nighttime skincare routine, and that's popularly referred to as slugging. But a lot of people find that uncomfortable. If you're dealing with redness on the cheeks, dry skin on the cheeks, you might just apply petroleum jelly to the cheeks. They also make this handy little stick from Vaseline brand, the petroleum jelly stick. Love that to apply. But there are alternatives to petroleum jelly that you might find more comfortable on the face. For example, instead of a petroleum-based skin protectant, you might instead elect a glycerin-based skin protectant. I find that these are super hydrating, likewise can help facilitate barrier recovery. A glycerin-based barrier jelly from the Korean brand Abib. Highly recommend this. Free of fragrance. Also, La Roche-Posay has a glycerin skin protectant. It's the Cicaplast gel. Those of you who watch my vlogs and you know my skincare routine, you know already I'm a huge fan of using this around the eyes to help with dry eyelids, but it's also great on the cheeks. La Roche-Posay also makes another type of skin protectant in the Cicaplast line, a dimethicone-based one. The Cicaplast Balm B5 with panthenol, as well as compounds from centella, which are good for soothing the skin. That's another option. It's more a matter of personal preference. Speaking of dimethicone-based skin protectants, might come as a surprise to you, but Monistat makes a chafing relief cream that is a dimethicone-based skin protectant, and it's great, of course, between the thighs, under the arms, to reduce friction that leads to chafing, but it's really wonderful on the cheeks, especially as a skin protectant for healing windburn. All right, guys, that is about what I wanted to say for today's video with regards to dry cheeks, common issue this time of year, as well as dry, chapped, cracked lips. If that's something you're dealing with, you're going to want to watch my video on how to heal cracked lips. I'll put it on the end slate. Check that one out next if you missed it. But if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.